"Could I speak to you for a minute? It's about your mom," said the doctor, pulling on my arm with a deeply troubled look on her face. Mom has been living in a wheelchair for 10 years, regularly coming to the hospital for checkups and rehab. Today, she's here for that reason, currently undergoing an exam. I was waiting to go for rehab when this doctor pulled me aside. If it's about Mom, I'll hear it from her primary care doctor." I gently shook my right arm free from the doctor's grasp. The doctor standing before me now is a woman, but Mom's primary doctor is a man. I wasn't informed of any changes. Why am I hearing about Mom from a doctor who isn't her primary doctor? With suspicion in my eyes, the female doctor in front of me impatiently wrapped her hands around mine. "There's something about your mom that I need to tell you, and only you. It's something that would be problematic if heard by her or her primary doctor." "Just to me?" I took a step towards the female doctor, who looked back at me with a serious expression. "I'm Madison, a 35-year-old single corporate employee. I work for a major company, but currently I'm working remotely for a particular reason. I've been raised in a single-parent family for as long as I can remember. My parents divorced when I was very young, and I have no memory of what my dad looked like or who he was. All I know is that his name was Michael. According to Mom, my dad was a good-for-nothing. He treated Mom like a slave, and left her because he said the child was in the way, running off with a younger woman he was having an affair with. We've never been able to get in touch with him since, and Mom has disposed of all photos that had Dad in them. Because of these circumstances, there was no dispute over custody after the divorce, and Mom took me in. I can never thank Mom enough for working late into the night and raising me single-handedly. Thanks to her, I was able to go to college and even land a job at a major company. Mom poured so much love into me that I never felt lonely growing up in a single-parent home. Besides, I've never felt the desire to meet Dad. Over and over, Mom would say, "That man was truly hopeless, Madison, so think of it as if you never had a dad to begin with." When I first heard about how Dad treated Mom and his infidelity, I couldn't contain my anger towards him. So even when I saw my friends' parents together at school events, I never felt envious. Just as Mom advised, I hardly ever thought about Dad, and I started living on my own as soon as I got a job. Although my job was demanding, I was living a fulfilling life until a turning point came when I was 25. Mom was involved in a traffic accident and ended up needing a wheelchair. Having lost her ability to walk, Mom had to quit her job, and the always bright and hardworking woman I knew began to lose her smile and became depressed. Unable to move as she used to, she spiraled into depression, and despite having numerous helpers, none seemed to fit well, leaving Mom growing increasingly frail. During this time, I received several calls from Mom saying she felt lonely and wanted me to come back home, which worried me enough to return to take care of her. I decided to use my paid leave to dedicate a week to her care, hoping to return to work once Mom got better. Mom seemed relieved by my return, showing smiles after a few days, but when I mentioned I'd be returning to my own place soon, her demeanor changed drastically. "No, Madison, please, don't leave. Don't leave me alone," she cried hysterically, clinging to me. "Mom, calm down. I understand. I'll talk to my company again." Confused but unable to turn away from Mom, who raised me by herself with so much sacrifice, and knowing how much she detested the idea of me living alone after getting a job, seemed she couldn't bear the loneliness. Perhaps her physical and mental condition had deteriorated too much. I consulted with my company and decided to switch to remote work, working shorter hours until Mom's condition improved. Then, ever since that day, Mom started to dislike being alone, always sticking close by even when I was working from home. No matter how much I explained that I couldn't have anyone but employees see my work, I had to ask her to leave the room. But Mom would always wait in a spot where she could see into my room. It felt like I was always being watched, and I resented myself for feeling suffocated by it. Mom continued her visits to the clinic for rehab, but her condition never improved, leaving me with no prospect of returning to the main office. My personal life was dominated by taking care of Mom, leaving no room for new relationships or a boyfriend, and this lifestyle has now entered its 10th year. Currently, Mom is 60, and it seems her dependency on me worsens with each passing year. Merely mentioning that I would leave the house for shopping would set her off into a frenzy, insisting I take her along. Calming her down took so long that living alone again seemed impossible. Yet I couldn't abandon my real Mom, who's loved and raised me from childhood. Then one day, Mom had a regular checkup, and I always accompanied her to the hospital. Her doctor was Dr. Thomas, a man in his 40s, and he had been overseeing Mom for 10 years. And I trusted him completely. After Mom went into the exam room for her checkup, I stepped outside the hospital to make a work call. When I was about to return to the exam room after about 10 minutes, a doctor stopped me. "Excuse me, you're Sophia's daughter, aren't you?" Sophia is my mom's name. The person who called out to me was a female doctor, seemingly around my age. Her name is Aria, and she recently started working at this hospital in the same department as Dr. Thomas, Mom's doctor. Surprised, I replied, "Yes, that's me. Is there something wrong?" "Do you have a moment? There's something I need to discuss with you about your mom." "About Mom? Sure, I don't mind." Thinking the exam wasn't over yet, I nodded in agreement. Dr. Aria seemed relieved and led me to a small private room close to the exam room, used for consultations. After being invited to sit, I took a seat across a small desk where Dr. Aria, sitting opposite of me, looked at me directly and asked, "You've moved back to your family home to take care of Sophia, right?" "Huh? Yes, that's correct." I shared with Dr. Aria that I had been taking care of Mom and working from home for the past 10 years. Since moving back home, I've hardly had the chance to hang out with friends, and I've never discussed this with anyone else. Dr. Aria listened quietly, nodding as I found myself venting frustrations I usually keep to myself. "I'm sorry for going on about this." "It's okay. So 10 years, huh?" She smiled kindly before suddenly becoming pensive, then looked at me seriously and began to speak. However, what reached my ears was not Dr. Aria's words, but Mom's scream. Rushing to the door in a panic, what I saw left me speechless, and then Dr. Aria slowly shook her head. "You should leave your home immediately. It's better to escape from your mom." Her straightforward statement left me speechless. Suppressing this rising anger, I thanked Dr. Aria. Then, without going back to Mom, I returned home. Upon arriving, I hurriedly began packing my belongings. The image of Mom I saw at the hospital haunted me. 2 hours passed as I continued packing, with countless calls from Mom coming in. She must be panicking because I didn't show up after her exam and rehab. Yet I kept ignoring the persistent calls, and only answered after settling down in the evening, having finished packing. "Madison, where are you now? I've called so many times. Why didn't you answer?" As soon as the call connected, Mom started yelling at me. Normally, I would apologize immediately, but this time... "Oh, I'm at home right now," I replied indifferently. "You went home and left me behind? Why would you do that?" Mom became nearly hysterical. "Dying," I said. "Look, Mom, I can't live with you anymore. That's why I'm leaving home." "What are you thinking? Without you, I can't manage to live. How am I supposed to get back from the hospital?" "Why don't you walk back? Your legs have been fine for a while now. You don't really need a wheelchair or care, do you?" As I continued, Mom let out a short scream. I could picture her shaking in turmoil. "I found out everything you've been hiding, Mom." I told Mom about what Dr. Aria shared with me and what I had witnessed myself at the hospital. According to Dr. Aria, recent exams showed no abnormalities in Mom's muscles, bones, or nerves. She speculated that it might be a psychological issue, believing she couldn't walk, which actually made it a reality. The power of belief is not to be underestimated, and she considered integrating mental health care along with physical rehab. So, she intended to suggest incorporating emotional care into the rehab process and called me for this reason. But then, a woman's scream came from the direction of the exam room. Wait, was that Mom's voice? Dr. Aria and I exchanged glances and rushed to check the exam room. There was a window through which we could see Mom swatting away as if at insects. Indeed, the scream was from Mom. But why were there insects in the exam room? It seemed she'd mistaken dust for something else, picking up the motionless dust and disposing of it in the trash can. Mom did all this herself. Without using a wheelchair or a cane, she walked with light steps to dispose of it. Dr. Aria and I were dumbfounded, watching from the corner of the hallway. Peeking out, it seemed Mom hadn't noticed us at all, walking back to her wheelchair and sitting down as if nothing was amiss. Passing by where we stood, Dr. Thomas entered the exam room, approached Mom, and she placed a brown envelope in his hand. He pocketed it as if nothing unusual had happened and then wheeled Mom away to the rehab facility. "Madison, are you okay?" I was stunned, and it wasn't until Dr. Aria spoke to me softly that I realized I was still standing there. It wasn't that she couldn't walk or believed she couldn't walk. She was pretending she couldn't walk. Dr. Aria hugged my trembling shoulders and slowly shook her head. Leave home now. Escape from Mom. I had finished packing to escape from Mom following her advice. During my explanation, Mom remained silent. Eventually, a deep sigh came through the phone, and perhaps realizing she couldn't deny it any longer, Mom began to speak the truth. It's true that I was in a traffic accident and was injured badly enough to require care, but thanks to rehab, I was able to walk with a cane 2 years after the accident. Hearing this, I was shocked. Only 2 years to recover? Then what was the last 10 years for? But I knew if you found out I could walk, you'd leave me. I couldn't bear that. Mom had some selfish reasoning. I always knew Mom loved me deeply from her behavior. She kept me bound to her by making me take care of her, ensuring I couldn't go anywhere. I love you more than anyone. I was just so lonely. No matter how many times Mom said that, my heart wouldn't budge. In these 10 years, colleagues have been promoted and some got married. I gave up my career and marriage for you, Mom. I've essentially sacrificed 10 years. Why lie and make me care for you? I was in touch and I came home on my days off. Why did it have to be this way? As I confronted Mom, tears started to overflow, and I finally declared I had no intention of caregiving anymore. Then at last I said, I'm leaving home today. Don't ever contact me again. And with that, I rejected Mom. Mom was still ranting about something, but I didn't listen and hung up the call. A month later, I, having started living on my own again, was at a certain hospital. Just as I was about to leave after my checkup, a familiar figure rushed towards me. It was supposed to be Dr. Thomas, Mom's doctor. He looked more gaunt than I remembered, with an air of exhaustion emanating from him. Wondering why he was at this hospital, I was taken aback by his desperate demeanor, but reluctantly agreed to listen to what he had to say. Then he confessed that he had known about Mom's recovery from the start, and had diagnosed her as disabled in exchange for money from Mom. The envelope Mom had handed him that day apparently contained cash as well. Due to Dr. Aria's complaint, the hospital had discovered the truth, and he was fired soon after. Furthermore, he was facing imminent arrest and the revocation of his medical license for continuously forging medical documents. However, I've done nothing wrong, he insisted. Shockingly, Dr. Thomas claimed that the money was not a gift from Mom, but hush money from me. He alleged that I had planned to defraud disability pensions by making Mom appear disabled, and had coerced him into writing the necessary documents under duress. Of course, none of this was true. It was Dr. Thomas who had reached out to Mom. To think he would try to shift the blame onto me now that he was facing arrest was unbelievable. What are you talking about? I did no such thing. No, it's the truth. I'll tell everything to the police without holding back. Dr. Thomas's eyes were bloodshot as he shouted, and I turned pale. There was not a single piece of evidence in Dr. Thomas's story, but proving my non-involvement with them would also be difficult. As I was on the verge of tears, contemplating the impossibility of proving a negative, a man approached me and stood in front of Dr. Thomas as if to shield me. Oh, you're the hospital director here. Oh, I have something important to discuss with you. At the sight of the man, Dr. Thomas's face turned ashen. He approached, trying to smile and rubbing his hands together, but the man frowned and glared at him. What are you doing to my daughter? Daughter? The man Dr. Thomas glared at was the director of this hospital, and also my dad, Michael. Yes, the dad I had separated from in childhood after he divorced Mom. My dad was actually a doctor too. As it turns out, my dad was a doctor who had risen through the ranks to become the director of a major hospital after leaving Mom. He had also been in favor of revoking Dr. Thomas's medical license after learning of his misconduct. So your family? Then please, I need to talk. I was coerced into writing those documents by her. It must be hard for you as a dad to see your daughter become a criminal. Please, could you speak on my behalf? Dr. Thomas begged for my dad's mercy on the spot, but Dad shook his head sternly. Don't be ridiculous. You and the hospital have deceived everyone, including my daughter, who cared for her mother for 10 years. She was kept at home for disability benefits, and you wanted to repay your gambling debts. Scammers like you deserve the appropriate punishment. With that, Dad dismissed Dr. Thomas's plea. Well, damn it. Realizing he was defeated, Dr. Thomas collapsed on the spot. Surrounded by onlookers, I could only watch him with an indescribable feeling. Then suddenly, someone pulled my arm hard from behind. Turning around in shock, I saw Mom standing on her own 2 feet, with a terrifying expression. What are you doing to Madison? He screamed, glaring at Dad. Mom, why are you here? I knew Dr. Thomas was looking for you, so I followed him here, Mom said, her determination chilling. Her resolve to find me was intense. Give Madison back. I won't let you take her, Mom yelled at Dad, her face more fierce than I'd ever seen, and I felt a shiver of fear. I shook off Mom's hand. Stop it already, I yelled. I knew all the stories you told me about Dad were lies. As I said this, Mom's expression changed and she started to panic. The truth was, Mom had been lying to me about Dad since their divorce to prevent me from wanting to meet him. All the stories about Dad treating her like a slave and leaving her for a younger woman were false. Dad, a dedicated doctor, was always busy and had no proper holidays, which Mom knew before marrying him. Yet her attitude changed drastically after I was born. She blamed him for being absent and not being able to go on family trips, deciding to divorce him on her own because she deemed him a bad father. Then, on my 3rd birthday, Mom suddenly took me and left the house. It turned out that it wasn't Dad who left, but it was Mom. After the divorce, Mom got custody because Dad, despite having sufficient income, didn't have time for childcare. However, Dad had been sending a substantial amount of child support every month, which I was completely unaware of until recently when I talked to Dad. Becoming a single parent, Mom grew increasingly dependent on me and lied about Dad being a no-good man to prevent me from moving in with my financially stable father. Dad had repeatedly asked to see me, but Mom kept refusing, claiming I didn't want to see him. There were times it seemed like a meeting would happen, but either Dad was called away for an emergency, or Mom would suddenly cancel for some reason and we never met. I have been told I couldn't contact my missing dad since I was little, but that too was a lie. We lived comfortably on Dad's child support, which is why Mom never returned to her parents' home and was able to send me to high school and college. The story about Mom working hard late into the night to raise me was also not true. She worked part-time during the day and spent her nights out to pretend she was struggling with parenting. "Where's the proof?" Mom muttered weakly, to which Dad replied, "The child support and tuition fees I've been sending and the working hours at the store you claim to work at can be verified." Mom slumped down, defeated. I realized I had been living a lie spun by Mom all my life. I was shocked when I first learned the truth, but now my anger outweighed the shock. "Thanks for everything, Mom, but this is the end." As I said this coldly, Mom clung to me. "Wait, Madison, I did it all for you." "It was all for yourself, wasn't it? Despite receiving a lot of money, you pretended to be a struggling single mother. Did you enjoy wasting 10 years of your daughter's life with lies? I can't trust you anymore. Don't ever get involved with me or Dad again." As Mom stood there speechless, unable to make excuses, I declared our estrangement and left the hospital with Dad. Afterwards, Dr. Thomas was arrested and lost his medical license. He was sentenced to prison for repeatedly forging medical documents and sued by the hospital for tarnishing its reputation. Mom was also charged with bribery for paying a doctor to write false medical diagnoses, ordered to return all the pensions she had received plus interest, and faced legal action for fraud. What happens to Mom from now on is no longer my concern, as I've cut ties with her. As for me, the shock of being betrayed by Mom led me to seek help at a major hospital, where I reunited with Dad while getting a referral. I was happy to learn that he hadn't forgotten me when he recognized my full name and reached out. Now I'm back to working at the headquarters, balancing work and hospital visits. Dr. Arya, who revealed the truth about Mom, exchanged contact info with me when I went to thank her later. And now we sometimes meet for coffee. It's refreshing to have conversations with anyone after so long. Dad and I also keep in touch regularly, reclaiming our time as a family. I'm going to see a movie with Dr. Arya soon. It's been about 10 years since I went to the movies with anyone, so I'm really looking forward to it. I shared this with Dad during a dinner out after work one day. Dad smiled gently. "From now on, live as you wish, Madison," he said. I nodded deeply, determined to enjoy a fulfilling life while planning for the future.